So I know I said I wasn't going to be playing many Satsuma games, at least on YouTube. I still definitely play it on live stream since it is such an amazing battleship. This video is not really about the ship we're playing, it's more about the matchmaker. I've talked about this in the past, but super ships certainly don't fit in the current map pool. Even on a big map like this, everyone's just shooting at each other over all these islands from one spawn to another. And in a match like this where we have 14 super ships, it gets a little bit ridiculous. And I think this is going to happen more going forward. More people getting their hands on super ships, more ships in each class type, more cruisers, battleships, destroyers, and we're certainly going to see many more games like this. There's even a few tier 9s in here. The poor people playing their tier 9s. Into matchmaker like this, it's certainly not the most enjoyable thing. I hope Wargaming looks at some of these matches, sees some of the data, and it's probably going to take a while for it to show up in their spreadsheets and all that, but I really do hope that it does show up in those spreadsheets, because these kind of matches are pretty common for super ships. And I do think if you looked at an overall average of heat maps, of where ships tend to go, where people tend to play, super ships would be much more passive. And a lot of the islands wouldn't be particularly useful given how long range everything is these days. So I know that super ships are here to stay. There's really not going back now that we have tier 11, tier 12 level ships. And we're getting a lot of daily missions or just combat missions in general to give you rewards for playing these super ships. They are very much here to stay. So I'm hoping that Wargaming can figure out a way to have them in the matchmaker, have them in the game still, without breaking the meta and forcing even more passive games on us. I suppose I shouldn't say breaking the meta, given the meta is relatively passive these days, but given how much effort and time was poured into adjusting maps and building out the entire underwater world for submarines, I hope that we'll give enough attention to the above water maps and for maps that at least would fit these super ships. Look at how much range I have on the Satsuma. This isn't really something that is special about the Satsuma at this tier. Patry also has this range. Hanover certainly has a little bit less, but with a spotter plane, it still can reach these levels of range. And with the accuracy, shelf light times with a lot of these battleships at this tier, it's not a huge deal to be hitting these targets outside 20 kilometers of range, which basically negates all of these islands. I've talked about this in other videos. I'd love to hear some of your ideas for what could help balance or make these super ships a little more interesting in the game, because they're here to stay. I don't think we can say just remove them. That's not really going to happen. But I really do think that an overall map update for high tier would be really good. I love what the art team's been doing. This new map update, for example, on Mountain Range here, it looks beautiful. I really like it. Maybe the water's a little bit too much of an electric blue, but I like the stylized aspect of it. It looks nice to my eyes specifically. I think that if we moved the islands a little bit, changed their shape, adjusted where they are and how far away they are from one another, I think we could have some really fun, balanced games where you actually have the opportunity to push up and actually use some of these islands, where now it feels a little too difficult to get in range. And this is a match, mind you, where we didn't even have a super carrier, or even any carrier, to give us early spotting. And within a minute or a minute and a half, we were already able to shoot a lot of the ships that were trying to approach some of these islands. Now I know it's probably quite difficult to just say, move the islands and the games will be less passive, allow people to push up and use these islands. There's a lot more nuance to it than that, but I do think that as these 14 super ship games and more become more and more common, I think we do need an adjustment. These maps work decently at tier 10, certainly quite good at tier 9 and below, but with super ships and their level of power at such long ranges, I do wish Wargaming would do some map updates, or I mean, even just add a few more higher tier maps, push some of these maps down in the matchmakers. So sure, you could still play tier 10 games on them. They do work reasonably well for that, but super ships can't be on some of these maps. There are still some tier 10 maps that work reasonably okay, but Even a big open one like Mountain Range here, you'll notice it's just a blowout where everyone was sniping at each other from each other's spawns. It doesn't really work, assuming that we want more gameplay than what a map like Ocean would provide. I do really like Ocean, to be clear. I actually don't dislike Ocean at all. I think it's a very interesting, different take on map design. It forces you to play a little bit different than you would on an island where there are even some islands like this one, or I think Okinawa is another one where it's quite wide open, but it's still not completely wide open. I think that as we have more bigger ships in the game, I'd love to see some bigger maps with bigger islands and more, maybe even dedicated lanes. I know it's a bit of a meme in, games like Call of Duty where they have 3 lanes, 3 objectives, and you all fight within those 3 lanes. I wouldn't mind seeing some of that here. I don't know how it would necessarily work, but it does seem like we have a lot of available cross shots, and it makes it very difficult for people to push in without just losing their ship. This Hanover is pushing in. I commend him for trying at the end of this game where, yeah, he lost a lot of his teammates early on, and there's really not much that can be accomplished here other than the enemy team actually losing here quite quickly. I think the Hanover is about to go down mixed in this crossfire here, and the enemy's pointed out to 0. We actually don't even make it to 1,000 points. And if you haven't checked in the missions tab, there is a lot of really good Superships missions. There's no wonder why so many people are playing Superships right now. You're getting quite a bit of coal here from this first mission. It does take a little while, right? 1,200 ribbons, especially 26,000 base XP in Superships. It's a lot of time spent in Superships, but you get some coal as a reward. But more importantly, once you're done that one, you get steel. Very, very tough resource to get. Usually, they are adding more ways to do it. Battle Pass is certainly one, but this is quite a bit of steel relative to just some simple missions by playing out your Superships. Of course, we're also getting some research points, more steel. These missions are really quite good for just accumulating a little bit of these resources. And I focus on steel because it's one that you're not really going to get a ton of unless you're playing a lot of clan battles. So focusing on these little bits of steel here and there can really help your way to a ship like Bourgogne, for example, one that I really, really like to play, but it's locked behind that steel barrier. So Superships definitely are here to stay, and I want them to be good. I enjoy playing my Satsuma. What can I say? I enjoy playing some of the other ones as well. They're quite interesting, fun ships in the right circumstances. I'm just concerned that a lot of these maps don't really fit these big, giant Superships, and that if we had some different maps, some updated ones that were specific to this tier, level of firepower, level of range, I think we could have more interesting games, and it wouldn't feel like these Superships have come in and just made the meta even more passive than it already was at tier 10. But let me know what you think in the comments down below. I really appreciate you guys watching this video, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.